We've officially launched our brand new Indie Author Bookstore, an online showcase featuring thousands of independently published books by ALLi members, and we built it as a visibility engine with authors in mind. Our goal is simple: to help indie authors reach new readers, gain meaningful exposure, and get noticed by book influencers who are actively looking for fresh voices and standout stories. You've done the hard work of writing, editing, publishing, and launching. Now let's make sure your book gets the attention it deserves. Upload your books onto the Indie Author Bookstore. Not an ALLi member yet? Join us and get your books listed. Welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi from the Alliance of Independent Authors. This week, Anna Featherstone discusses production and distribution, guiding indie authors through the many ways to create, publish, and distribute their books. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gatekeeper Press, your partner in independent publishing, empowering authors with expert guidance, 100% rights, 100% royalties, global distribution, and all-inclusive services from editing to marketing. Gatekeeper Press, where authors are family. And now, here's your host, Anna Featherstone.
Welcome, and thanks for tuning in from your special part of this beautiful planet. I'm Anna Featherstone, joining you today from the lands of the Gadigal people, the original storytellers of this land in Sydney, Australia. And today we're looking at publishing and distribution choices through one author's experience and what you as a writer and creator might take from that for your own work, including how to think beyond the writing itself and consider a book's wider impact. Welcome, Lande Jewels.
Hello, Anna. It's lovely to be here with you today.
It's great to see you. Now, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in London. It's evening in London and it's been raining all day. So I've been really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, well, I'll bring the sunny vibes because it's a beautiful sunny day down here. And hopefully together we can bring good weather everywhere. So how long have you lived in London?
Oh, I'm going into my third decade right now. So sort of over 25 years. It's been a journey. I would say by far the most part of my life has been in London.
Oh, incredible.
More or less in the same place as well.
Oh, yeah. So where did your creative journey begin? Like, how did you come to writing?
So my writing journey really begins pretty much in my really, really early childhood. So I kind of began rhyming pretty much as soon as I started talking. And so my parents would say I started about age 3 because it gave me a way to put my impressions of the world in a sort of an interesting, melodic, organized way. And then I picked up the habit of journaling, and that took me through sort of the adolescence and the teenagehood, and then throughout my career. It was something that I loved doing at the end of the day, put my thoughts in order to, monitor something, to kind of share my ideas and some secrets. And so journaling in a sort of rhyming form has been with me pretty much for my whole life. In terms of the authorship, the published authorship writing, that sort of began much later in life. I never really considered becoming an author because it was something that, I don't know, it seemed to be a side of me which wasn't connected to the kind of earning money part of a career. It was much more of a, something just for me alone. And so my background was in finance and later in philanthropy and sort of the corporate world. And when I became a parent, that had to change. I could no longer travel the same rate. I could no longer work 14 hours a day in the office. So I had to sort of adjust. But obviously I was used to being busy all day long and being out of the house the whole time. So what that meant was, I'd leave in the morning with a pram and my journal and basically just take notes of everything that came along the way. And I've walked all around London, different places for, long enough to gather enough impressions of the town. And then my child was then interested in what I wrote for some reason. She was just curious looking at my scribbles. And then I started reading it aloud, and I realized, well, actually, if I read it aloud, it allows me to sort of hear it myself. And then that was the motivation to then put it into kind of more edited writing. Then I added pictures to it because I thought it would be more interesting for her to look at. And then at some point there came a sort of a need to print it nicely, because so we can take it with us and, she can play with it and so on. So I found completely randomly on some blog that, you could print it nicely with a KDP, put an extortionate price on it, but nobody buys it, but you can still print it. And that's what I did. I didn't put the extortional price because I thought maybe someone will benefit. And but that was sort of my first book, which I...
So you really started writing for your own daughter, and to get it printed for her, then you're like, oh, I'll just leave it up there for others as well.
Pretty much. I mean, I guess initially it was even more for just me keeping kind of, I guess, sane in the new world of motherhood and sort of being out there and keeping my mind busy and making sure that I have enough intellectual stimulation. And obviously, if I came across something interesting, I would then go to the library, pick up, 10 books on the subject and read about it and make it into more of a story. And it sort of built from then. And then when I saw that there's, I became interested. And then people around me became interested. And then they shared with the local library and then invited me to talk there. And it sort of then built from there in that sort of very natural, organic way.
I have so many questions already. So firstly, you said how as a young person, you started rhyming kind of naturally. Mm-hmm. When you're asleep, do you sleep and dream in rhyme?
Sometimes I wish I woke up and wrote it down. But unfortunately, sometimes you sort of just don't do that. Yeah. And yes, but I do have memories of, very enjoyable time during my dreams, sort of listening to my own
that's fun.
Rhyming exercises and there's some verses. I do like sort of very classical works like Goethe and Dante. They really put me into that very elevated state, and I think part of me kind of yearns to be doing that, and so whenever I can, it's sort of I let myself head that way with that sort of freedom, I guess, of expression. And sometimes, when we sleep, then obviously the subconscious then allows that to happen. And by the time you wake up...
How many of the children's books have you produced?
Well, in fact, none of these books are actually children's. So I've kind of called it London Baby Series because... he was born in London, was conceived in London, he was by Londoner, and it was mostly about London. And so it seemed to me that calling it London Babies sort of made sense. I then realized that maybe it was a bit confusing. So I'm sort of working out around the branding a little bit. But it wasn't so much for children as the language got really complex. So the earlier books, the sort of early editions were much simpler. And then I sort of made it a lot more complex with historic fact, sort of observations and conversations I had with people who were specialists in the field. So it became sort of still in that rhyme form, but it was a lot more kind of encyclopedic in the sense, a lot more educational, informative. I was craving facts as well because I wanted that intellectual integrity to be continued throughout my books because it's sort of nonfiction. It's not really subjective interpretation of the world. It's much more rooted in the fact. So it sort of then steered towards being kind of very adult focused. I think my youngest readers would be about 9, 10, but they would be probably the majority would be kind of later.
Okay, and we're going to talk about your current big projects a bit later. But so is Lande Jewel your real name or a pseudonym?
So this is my pen name or / artistic name. It's actually made up from my real name, but it's got sort of an addition to it that was extra. And I arrived to that again by sort of natural accident in a way. My previous project was in sort of diamonds and jewelry. And I had I'd created a company called Lande Jewels because that sort of incorporated both my name and that sort of element of jewelry. And then so I had the website set up and the company set up and everything sort of set up. And then things changed. And then there was COVID and I realized, well, actually, I'm not going to pursue that route because, my priorities have changed and so on. But I've already had the infrastructure there. So I was like, well, actually, it already has my name in it. So I'll just keep it and use it, continue using it as my artistic name. So that stayed ever since. And now I'm known as Lande Jewels as a name.
Yeah. Okay. So your latest book, Musea, is a poetic guide to London's museums.
That's correct.
Written entirely in rhyming verse and with illustrations. I want to know, who do you see as the audience for it? How did you come up with the concept? Talk to us a bit about this big project.
Yeah, sure. So Musea is actually number 15 of the series. So all the previous books were also mostly about London in the same style. So I started off with, what was that? It was the Christmas, and then there were the streets and the bells. And so all the things that I've come across in London, I would put in that sort of format with illustrated verse and kind of break it down by subject. So I have one book for different subjects. So I'll have, bells, what tale bells tell. And it will be all about the bell founding, the bell ringers in London, and how that craft evolved and so on. There would be one about sites, which is the landmarks of London, the iconic place that everybody knows, plus many more that not many people know. There would be urban wildlife, where wild freestyled, so about the encounters with the creatures in London and the different wildlife. There would be stations about sort of overground, underground, and so on in London, and the wonderful stations. And that alone took quite an interesting journey. So it sort of, depending on the subject that was taking, it would then shape the book. So I will have one on infrastructure called Works, all about things like sewage and tunnels and roads.
Yeah.
Things which tend to be very unpoetic, but because it was an adventure, it was interesting. It was the whole topic that then included things like engineering, and famous engineers. So you could weave in the history of it, bridges. There are 32 bridges on the River Thames, many more pedways and so on. So that was a whole book itself. And so eventually I got to there's one on gravers, which is cemeteries and crypts and so on, burial places. And that in itself was, that took a whole summer of going to the graveyards, which was, an interesting choice of summer. But it produced a very interesting book, and it's still one of my favorites. So sort of naturally, it then led to Musea because obviously that's a big part of London, and it's it's full of those museums and historic houses, and there were so many that I thought perhaps I'll break it into a couple of books. But then obviously you start one, and then you realize, well, just you might as well do it once. And so Musea has 175 places, which include museums and historic houses that are considered museums, and they are within the London /Greater London area, which not majority, probably about 20% of them I've known about before I started writing, because like most Londoners, I was not aware about majority of those places, and and it's sort of, as soon as I started writing, I've discovered more, and I've consulted the different guides and sort of went further afield.
So like the human guides at those places or guidebooks?
Both actually would have been the sort of the guidebooks. And then here in London, we have something called the Art Fund, which is this sort of organization that you buy membership, and then it gives you a list of, museums, historic places. It doesn't cover all of them. But between Art Fund, Historic England, National Heritage, and so many other places, you could sort of put together the overall list, plus the Google Maps that you can sort of find your way around. And that gave me a good indication of, what to make of it within the reachable distance, because I cycle everywhere. So it had to be, within 2 hours each way. Otherwise it would have been unsurmountable. So, that's kind of how, and again, to continue with the same style, so consistency, because I was already in the habit of doing it this way. It was done in the same way. So I'd go to every place, some of them more than once, some of them I've been many, many times. and speak to people there. We have volunteers generally in the museums here, and they're very keen to, talk about the place. And so the actual text would then be born from my own impressions. My child was with me the whole time. And, obviously what she thought about the place, and then the conversations we'd had with the volunteers, the little booklets that were given out. So all of these pieces of information will then come together to produce the core structure of the text. And then if I wanted to add more, then there will be a trip to the library. Luckily, we have quite a good selection of books in the library and can order all kinds of subjects. So yeah, it's sort of that it was created based on experience, really.
Yeah. So how long have you been working on this book then? On Musea?
I think, well, if I'm completely honest, taking everything into account, it would have probably been the whole time I've been in London, because, all these initial impressions are formed by going there again and again and again. So, I don't know how many times I've been in National Gallery or Tate Modern. These are the places that you just know by heart by now. So, yeah, majority of them I would have visited in the last 2 years, probably the last even year. And then, about a quarter of them I would have visited before, and then kind of had come back there again to just make sure that, I remember what it is, and to make pictures of the places, to then, just get the angle right and so on. So,
and tell me, which was one of your favorite quirky ones? One that you were like, oh my goodness, this is crazy, or...
Do you know what? The medical museums are generally quite interesting, because they go sometimes borderline with things which are, not really shown to public, if you see what I mean. So we have a museum called the Barth Pathology Museum and the Hunterian Museum. So both of them have a vast collection of specimens in jars, which include, things that you probably don't want to know. So
I don't need to go there.
I think those were quite, deeply impressing. We have something called Crime Museum, which is generally off to the public. So it's off limits because it's used to train the police and so on. And this year it was 150 years of Metropolitan Police. And so there was a special exhibition in the Police Museum, slightly further out of London, that had specimens from the Crime Museum, the older things. And then, so it was very kind of interesting, again, quirky. And the local history museums are always very interesting because they tend to be a lot smaller and very, very particular and very interactive. And
do you see these, like when you were there, were you discussing with them the book so that they might become an outlet for the book as well? Like, is that going to be a distribution channel?
Some of them. So obviously there are so many of them, and some of them have shops. Some of them vast, like the V&A, for example. Then of course, that's a topic of conversation. And there are, 4 V&As right now. There are others which are, just one room. They don't have any outlets, and you need to go there by appointment. So it really depends on the on what kind of museum it is. So those that have shops, that of course, that's a conversation that we're having. Those that don't have shops might have libraries attached. So for example, the sports museum usually have libraries attached. So, my cricket museum, for example, they've specifically asked me to send them a copy so that they can have it in their library or display, if ever they'd be interesting. So it really kind of depends on which ones. Most historic houses don't have a shop, and because also they're not open all year round because there's no heating. So it depends on the place, really. So
yeah. Okay. So you said that when you would visit museums, you'd take photos. So let's discuss that production side of how do you work with the illustrations? Like, what's the process to, how do you get them and then into the book?
So illustrations, what I do is I tend to have it as a collage of the photography, sketches, watercolors, and sometimes some scribbles on top. So it really depends on how good I can do it digitally. I don't use generative tools. I use basic Photoshop brushes if I need to check on the light or something like that. But generally, it would be a mixture of the photographs I take on the day about the place. And then I will do some drawings and then maybe put them in layers on top of each other. And then I might use just some, small kind of watercolor brushes in the Photoshop. And that will kind of give me a very, particular style of the illustration, which I've used across my old books. So, yeah.
And are you then using Adobe to actually print, like, are you designing the book as well?
That's right. Yeah. So I use Photoshop for, just to tidy up the images, just to make sure they look fair, they're in the same format and they can be put in a book. I would use either Pages or Microsoft Word to create the actual sort of book and then turn it into a PDF. And then so you can also have the Adobe PDF, something called Adobe PDF service. And
just to look,
and then it can, sort of edit the PDFs as well.
Okay,
Most of my files are in PDFs,
Yeah, but that original thing to get there, though, so you're not using a book program like Vellum or Atticus. You're using Microsoft Word mostly, or Pages.
Pages, yeah. Mac had Pages pre-installed and actually only recently started using the Word in the Google Docs as well, because it's sort of actually, I find the editing is better there as opposed to the Pages. So yeah, I would just create a template for the book so that it's got the margin, it's got the positioning and so on. And then input the text in there and the fonts and so on. Again, the fonts are consistent throughout the books. The covers are more or less consistent. So it's pretty easy once the template's done to then just put in the text in there.
Okay. Okay. Now, so you've got the books then, and so then you're distributing using Amazon and any other platforms?
Sure. So most of the books I have on various platforms. So I have them with the KDP and Amazon. I have them with Ingram Spark. I have them with the Book Vault. So my website is connected to the Book Vault, so they do the fulfillment if the orders are coming from the vault. And I find the Book Vault has the highest quality of the printed materials, and there's the better choice of paper and so on. However, for example, on Amazon platform, they would tend to prioritize Amazon published titles. So I've used to have problems with Book Vault titles not displaying on the Amazon, and so I sort of had to publish them on various platforms to just make sure that they are available throughout. And then that's because so far my titles have been print on demand. But obviously with the Museum, I'm looking into now small print runs because the kind of quality that I want for this book is simply not available on the print on demand. And this book kind of wants that extra quality. It wants to be laid flat, and it's so big. I mean, it's here and it's quite thick, and it's just got so much information there that once you start actually using it properly, it becomes. Yeah, it needs to be more durable, basically. That's just
okay. So let's talk about your thoughts around a special edition, and also your thoughts around social responsibility and how authors make choices. So you said that authors don't seem to be expected to show a wider social awareness or social responsibility compared to what would be expected of other businesses. Like, there's an assumption that the writing of a book is automatically a good thing. Mm-hmm. And then that's kind of where authors leave it. So yeah, explore that with me, because it's obviously led to some of the decisions you're making around the production of the special edition.
Yeah, so special edition is special in the sense that it will be a much better quality, but also it will be produced in a very special way. So as Musea celebrate the sort of places that have been protected by time and by the people, it's very important that the production of it also reflect that sort of willingness to protect the cultures, especially the cultures that are at risk. So with the printing of the special edition, I've gone out to Ukraine, and the reason being, sort of in 2024, the biggest manufacturer, the biggest printer of books in Ukraine, received a missile attack. 7 people died, 22 were critically injured. that facility alone printed about 40% of all school textbooks for the country and books for over 30 publishers. So it was a tragedy. And within a year, that facility recovered and the book artisans have bravely come back to work. Now, the work is still disrupted there because of what's going on in that region, but they have sort of opened up to business again as much as they could. Now, my background in philanthropy and nonprofit sector, as well as the corporate sector, always kind of pushed me to look into the projects with a wider social impact. And so that was an obvious choice to then look into those printers and try and sort of work together to then create a format that will be both manageable for them, because they usually focus on much bigger print runs and much more sort of standard editions as opposed to, cloth bound with ribbons and so on. But because of kind of the special connection I wanted to build between the places that are protected, the cultures that are protected here in London, and the culture that was not protected at the time and is still at risk, I wanted to make sure that edition reflects that special angle and that it is produced in a very beautiful and very sort of meaningful way.
So what kind of things can this printer bring to the book? So tell us how the special edition, what are going to be the special features?
Okay, so the special features are the premium materials, the best materials that you probably get. So it has the fine cloth, it has the G-Silk acid-free paper, it has the headband, scale band, has the ribbon, it has, what does it have? It has full color, it's offset printing, so it will have a full palette of colors. What else? I mean, that's pretty,
that sounds pretty special.
It's properly sewn, so it's Smith sewing as well. So it means that it will be durable.
Okay.
Yeah. So it means that however you bend it, it will last like the museums do. I mean, I'm hoping that it will be the edition that will age really well because of the sort of the color palette and the type of cloth that we're selecting and the kind of paper and the kind of the colors that we're selecting are the ones that will be aging well. And that aging and that sort of concept of continuity and passing on is something, again, I want to be reflected in that book.
Yeah. So with the paper, do you, off the top of your head, do you know the GSM, like the weight of the paper?
Yes, it's 115.
Okay. Yeah.
It's relatively thick. You could go thicker, but because it's already over 400 pages, it could make, it's already quite chunky.
It would be a huge tome.
Exactly. And it's better to keep it at its maximums, yes.
Yeah. And for people looking at doing illustrations in their book, like, 'cause that's always something to think about, like the type of paper, will the image bleed through to the next page on the other side? And all those kind of decisions have to be thought about that final book looks beautiful. Will you be doing a proof copy?
So because the printer is set up in such a way that they're doing offset straight away, they wouldn't be producing sort of a one copy to show. However, I've seen other books of this kind of caliber. They were sent to me and sort of to other people I know on the ground. And we looked at them sort of very carefully to see how, the corners are done and the edges and so on and so forth. And the quality has been pretty good. So considering they will continue to do it this way and, they will do because that's their job. I'm pretty confident that they will produce a beautiful piece.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like, if I'm doing a print run, I will normally pay that extra for them to set up the whole print run just to get that proof copy, because sometimes I've discovered, oh my gosh, like actually that color that they actually used on the, but it's such an expense, which is why, using Ingram Spark or something for a normal print run, it's easy to get a one-off proof. But on such a big book like what you're doing, it would probably be incredibly expensive for them to clear the production run just to do one copy. You're like, oh, it's one of those.
It is
Yeah,
one
it's
of
fascinating,
those, yeah.
isn't it?
I've
Choices we make, and
that's right. I mean, I've had the museum printed as a paperback here with the print on demand, and I mean, it prints well. And considering the quality of print will be higher than it is now, it can only be better, really.
With people really overseeing it and really, there's a beautiful on special editions that human energy and touch of experts around it can make all the difference.
It's the craftsmanship because, of course, these are the kind of extra work that is being put in a book to make it that much more special. So I really look forward to it.
Yeah, and holding it in your hands, I'm sure, would be amazing. So, okay, so it's all well and good that we write and publish books, but it's the distribution and marketing that often gets it. So, I wanted to know, like, I know we're recording this interview before your Kickstarter. And Kickstarters can go well or they don't go well. But why did you decide to go the Kickstarter route?
I've looked into different ways of sort of launching the book, and I've launched the paperback only at the end of November last year, so it's a very short time ago, and it's about the time then the printers in Ukraine have confirmed that they'll be able to do that. So it was a very quick sort of momentum type decision where I was like, all right, so what's going to give it the biggest push in terms of the marketing, in terms of the momentum and so on? Because of course, in that region in particular, even though now there is a sort of a special plan in place that, if one facility gets disrupted, there's a network of other places that will pick up the slack and to make sure that there's continuity. I didn't want to kind of delay that moment of production. So in a way, I've kind of done it the wrong way. What Kickstarter usually does not advise. They advise to have a 3 to 6 month pre-launch time and get the momentum and so on. I felt that for this book in particular, and for the situation where we are right now, geopolitically and generally, it seemed like I had to push that button while the Big Bang was ringing on the New Year's Eve, to just get it out there and give it a chance. Because waiting, it might have been a good idea, maybe not, but it felt like it was momentum at the time. So how it's going to go, we'll see. In any case, whether it's the Kickstarter that fulfills it or not, it is something that gave me then the push to develop the idea of sort of Ukrainian manufacturing further. And luckily, how it is, UK and Ukraine now have a free trade agreement, which means that all the goods imported from the Ukraine are duty-free. So they don't have the import duty. And in the UK, the books are VAT-free. So there is a window for the next 3 years of sort of importing from Ukraine in a very tax-efficient way. And that sort of in itself opened quite a big list of opportunities for books and the related printing supplies and also merchandise, because the quality can be good. And the sort of the manufacturing can be quite good. The shipping is pretty efficient. It's not, from Asia. It's much closer. And so as long as there's no language barrier or cultural barrier, which I don't have, then eventually it could be an interesting opportunity. So it's sort of with the Kickstarter, yes, it was the book that museum, but then it's also opened the window to potentially encourage other indie authors to join me in that social impact printing and potentially, bulk the orders together or develop new partnerships or, have art prints or something like that to kind of work with it. So that's the plan for this year, really, to develop that socially impactful partnerships.
And I think it's just interesting for authors to think more about, it's not just your book, it is how you produce it. Or, the artists you use to help, or there are so many ways, even like just margin sizes. Can you save some paper? Different things like that. There's all things we can think about with a socially conscious lens on our work. And, where do people put money into advertising? Is that a platform you really believe in? And creating new ways, I suppose, and having conversations around that. I think that's fascinating, and a really fun thing to do and important. So, if I suppose we'll see what happens with the Kickstarter, but if not, it feels to me like you're going to work out a way to get this book done anyway. As the special edition.
Pretty much.
You seem a little bit determined.
I think it's important to commit yourself to something, and then it's still a learning exercise to find the best sort of platform to support yourself. And what I'm finding is that as soon as I launched, I realized that the vast majority of the people I knew who were willing to support me had no idea how Kickstarter works, and they still even a few days ago that they'll be notified somehow about something. So there are the people who are kind of the real people around, who go to my events in the library, at the talks and so on. They don't kind of know how it works, and they don't necessarily understand so there is the whole educational point, which then raises the question is that the right platform then? It could potentially be to, bring extra viewers, extra backers from, other channels I wouldn't have thought otherwise. And it gives you something to talk about to, the press, just generally, it's a good thing. It's a subject to talk about. At the same time, it's important to kind of be aware that it might not be the right one. It might be, or it might not be. So it doesn't mean that you should stop there. It just means that at different points, you will cover different sort of ways to complete your goals. It doesn't mean you should drop your goals. It just means that on that particular platform, not enough people knew about it or decided to carry it, but it doesn't reflect everybody else's kind of opinion. So,
and it's also you kind of mentioned there, it's a step. So there's so many steps we take in publishing, and each one leads to something else. So if you hadn't decided to, run a Kickstarter, I know authors, I say to some authors, do you know what? I think you actually should set up a Kickstarter campaign, because it's actually going to make you think more about your book and what else you can offer authors. Because when you have to put in the different levels of gifts, they're like, oh, and then you get more creative, because you're like, well, what else could I do here? And then that actually helps build your business anyway, because you're experimenting and exploring. So even if the Kickstarter eventually, it's almost like forces you to have a marketing plan.
No, absolutely.
And forces you.
And have it there and then. Yeah. Because when I launched, I only launched with, early bird, 1 copy, 3 copies, 10 copies. That's it. And then I joined the Kickstarter community and started asking questions.
Yes.
Can you give me some feedback on this? And then, of course, people have responded with, well, you need to have more tiers, you need to have more rewards, you need to have this and that. And now I have a whole page of, various rewards. I have a coloring book, I have art prints, I have, archival quality art prints, postcards, accordion prints. I mean, all kinds of things. The donor option, the just a whole bunch of different options I haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
Then in the past few days of feedback, it then sort of blended then into that whole kind of marketing and the tier system. So now it's out there. Then even if sort of beyond Kickstarter, these are the things I might continue doing anyway. So, I mean, of course, there will be some which are signed and numbered, but there are others which are much more kind of large volume, much more voluminous.
And if you ever attended a book fair or a historical festival or something with your books, you'd have some extra things to add color and creativity on your table. And not everyone wants to buy a big book, but they might say, oh, that's a beautiful postcard or print, or I'll get that to support you. It's fascinating. So what else are you looking at for marketing?
So for marketing, early on, I adopted the strategy of writing more books to market myself. So I've kind of looked at different options to advertise, to market the books. I've read all kinds of articles by the indie authors and not indie authors. And I think the one overriding comment was that, well, get the next book to promote your previous ones. And that's basically kind of the approach that I've taken. And 15 books later, I'm pretty much thinking that was the way to go. And I did not really do much outreach for up until maybe 2 years ago. I simply did not have time to sort of go out there and face the public and so on. I had other commitments, so I focused on the writing and having the local real community of people, the people who I go and speak to, the people I'll have coffee with and so on. So they would be the ones who will be supportive, who will then say, oh, maybe you should go to that club, and there's that ladies club they would like to hear. There's a little bit of that community feel, which felt a bit more secure at the time when a lot of things have become so virtual that you wouldn't even know who your real friends are. So I has kind of grown that way, and then at some point I thought I'll try the paid marketing. So I think I tried a campaign with the Aussie Librarian and some other service I can't remember for my Christmas book, and I made the book free. It was the first in a series, and we sort of marketed the series that way, which had probably cost me just over $100. And what I've seen was that the number of downloads went through the roof, and it hit into like top 10 on Amazon for the last 2 days or something, for 2 days in a row. However, I have not seen any impact on all the other books, because that was the idea.
Yeah.
That you sort of give away the first one. You get lots of reviews, and then there's the sell-through. I personally have not seen the sell-through at all. And I've only had something like 3 reviews for the book from, thousands of downloads. So it felt like actually maybe people downloaded it just because it was out there without actually committing to reading and so on. So I've kind of stopped really marketing at that point, paid advertising. When Mizia was coming out, I looked into Amazon ads. And I think by the time I've honed the criteria, it was so narrow, the pay-per-click, that I think for 4 weeks, it only generated something like 20 clicks. And I thought, well, actually, it's either then, it didn't seem like the return on investment was there. So where my where my sales mostly happen is on author events and sort of direct sales. So that seems to be
it feels right for also such a personal type of project. As well. Like it's, and I think what you said before about it's almost like 2026. It's the year people really do need to get out and about and be in person if possible. Because with so many books out there, and we don't know, what's created by AI, and it's all about real people and real projects and people's passions. Like, I mean, obviously you're so passionate to have visited that many museums that many times, then done the illustrations, like then written in like rhyming. It's like, oh my goodness, like, this is what's so wonderful about being independent authors. We can do what we care about and bring it to the world. It's so exciting. So this is such a big project, but I do need to ask, have you got another project planned?
So in relation to the Mizia book, obviously I would like to develop more partnerships between sort of the Ukrainian manufacturing and the UK, or potentially other international ones, because to kind of take the advantage of the free trade agreement. So I'll be looking into that this year. Now, I think preparing for this conversation and generally working around this sort of the special edition made me really think about socially responsible authorship as a topic to develop, because there's a lot written about the corporate social responsibility, and I have worked with this in the past. Then there is the social business, and which was pioneered by Professor Mohammed Yunus, whom I actually had the pleasure of meeting personally. So there is that business and corporate, but in terms of the authors, there isn't really a topic in that sense. And I've done some research on that, and it seems to be concerning mostly scientific writing, or the sort of the actual, the sort of the academic writings, really, as opposed to what I'm trying to say here, as opposed to the kind of calling the authors to sort of not bury their head in the sand, but to concern themselves with, the condition of man today and not be afraid. Because at the moment, I think most people are afraid to put out their actual sort of concerns about certain subjects, because they can potentially, they fear they'll lose sales, or that something's too sensitive, or whatever. However, I think the responsibility of the author is to actually put that message across. I mean, that's what authors have been doing for centuries in the past. They were social pioneers. There were people, there were leaders in wordcraft and wordsmithing, and they shaped the impressions on things. They've disseminated the messages. And so in a way, it sort of feels like unless it's a topic that we bring into the conversation, the writings and the authorship will become a little bit insignificant, if you see what I mean, socially speaking. It's a bit sort of removed from the reality, a bit removed from what's going on in the world in this day and age, in this time, and so on. So this is the topic I'll be working on, and it's I'll be writing a book about it, which will probably get out sometime later this year, maybe summer, maybe autumn. So yeah, that will be something that I'll be doing.
There's an author, I'm not sure if you know, Dr. Cory Doctorow.
Yes.
Fascinating to read too, about the whole publishing industry and everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So might be fun to interview for your book.
Yeah, why not? Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll definitely be doing more things out there. And I guess you've asked about more project. I think it would be more getting my existing series more widely distributed, a bit more, because I've been on few platforms so far, but not sort of wide distribution. And I've just recorded all the audiobooks, all the 15, so they're out on Audible now. But again, I think wider distribution is probably better eventually. So, and it takes time.
Which is possible now. There's some great platforms out there that allow that.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, it has been absolutely lovely. I'm just glad we finally got together to do this. It's always crazy with the time zones. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lande. Now, we'll put your links in the show notes, but do you want to just say right now, like, where people can find your books?
Absolutely. So I have an author website, which is www.landejewels.com. I have a TikTok, which I use just to put out snippets of my work. I tend not to be really contactable over there, but occasionally I can respond to the comments. So the TikTok, there is the Kickstarter, which we'll see how it goes. But I think the author website is the best way to contact me. There's a contact form. There's some, email information. The sign up is there, and I think that will be the first step to do, is to sign up for the newsletter, because that will then bring all the announcements and news and offers and whatnot.
Yeah, all the fabulous things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And to everyone out there listening as part of our very special ALLi podcast family, thank you again for joining us. I always learn something on this podcast and exposed to different things, and I just love being able to be a part of it. So sending you all the best writing and publishing vibes. Until next time.
Thank you, Anna. Bye. Thank you.
You've been listening to Self-Publishing with ALLi with Anna Featherstone. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gatekeeper Press, your partner in independent publishing, empowering authors with expert guidance, 100% rights, 100% royalties, global distribution, and all-inclusive services from editing to marketing. Gatekeeper Press, where authors are family. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.